In fact, Judge Jackson remains more of a defense attorney for criminals from the bench than a judge. Across the board, Judge Jackson's average sentences for criminals are 34% lighter than the national average for criminal cases, and 25% lighter than the average on her own old court, the D.C. District Court. You would be lucky if your case is assigned to Judge Jackson. If you are the victim of a crime or anyone else seeking justice, you better hope your case got assigned somewhere else. As a trial judge, Judge Jackson could only give the benefit of the doubt to one criminal at a time. As a Supreme Court justice, she would be able to give the benefit to criminals nationwide in all cases.
She has written, and I'm quoting her, these are her words, that every judge has personal hidden agendas, end quote. That influences the cases they decide. The lightest sentences possible. She serves on the board of a K-12 school that teaches kindergartners that they can choose their own sex and teaches them about so-called white privilege. And she has praised the now discredited 1619 Project and has stated that judges should consider critical race theory in sentencing criminal defendants. You have repeatedly dressed down my Republican colleagues and me for asking Judge Jackson tough questions. You did it throughout the hearings, you did it at last week's markup, and you've done it repeatedly in the media, including before we even had a chance to ask a question. You called our questions vile, baseless, and imputed dishonorable motives to us. My Democrat colleagues claimed that the probation reports justified her decision, so we asked to see them. It was a reasonable request, but you responded by insinuating that we wanted to hurt children, and you specifically questioned why I, as a mother, would take that position.
A couple years later, though, she found a way to twist the law to resentence him below the mandatory minimum sentence by making the First Step Act retroactive, even though Congress had explicitly chosen not to make it retroactive. When all 11 Republicans on this committee sent a letter asking for details of what happened, Judge Jackson refused to provide any further information. I guess so much for looking at her record. Well, whether it was assigned or volunteered, the fact that Judge Jackson didn't do a very good job. In 3 of the 4 cases, her filings were identical, word for word, comma for comma. She alleged identical facts and legal arguments in every one of those cases. The only differences was the swapped out name and case numbers. Famously, when Senator Blackburn asked her what a woman was, she claimed that she had no idea. I asked her who has more of a right to be in the United States, new American citizens who follow the rules, waited their turn and came the right way, or illegal aliens whose very first act in the United States was to break our laws and who continue breaking them every day that they remain here illegally. Judge Jackson declined to answer. And of course, she refused to take an opinion on court packing, unlike the justice she would replace, Stephen Breyer, or the sainted Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Judge Jackson plays ignorant not because she doesn't know these answers, but because her liberal judicial philosophy is based on denying reality and trying to invent a new reality through the brute force of will as a judge.
That this is a case that anyone, first-year law school, would be familiar with. They would know this case, but Judge Jackson claimed not to be familiar with the case, so I asked her whether she agreed with Justice Ginsburg in that case that there are physical differences between men and women that are enduring, and she refused to answer. So then I asked her a very simple question. I asked her to define the word woman. Wasn't a trick question. It's something that everybody learned in grade school science class. But Judge Jackson refused to answer. The fact that she couldn't or wouldn't answer that question speaks volumes. It tells me that Judge Jackson is beholden to the radical left that is teaching our children that they can choose their own sex. It tells me that she is more committed to woke progressive ideology. Will Judge Jackson be able to resolve sex discrimination claims if she can't decide whether the parties before her are women. Biological males competing in women's sports are working their way through the federal courts. How can a Judge Jackson decide any of these issues as a Supreme Court justice? In the time since Judge Jackson sat before this committee, Disney has eliminated saying boys and girls. The State Department announced you can select X as a gender on your passport. The TSA will implement gender-neutral security screenings. The left has slowly but surely stripped words of their meaning in an attempt to eliminate dissent. And the latest victim of this campaign is the word woman.
She also worked hard to strike down a Trump administration policy of removing recently arrived illegal aliens. The law passed by Congress granted DHS, quote, sole and unreviewable discretion on the issue. But Judge Jackson inserted herself to strike down what she called, quote, a terrible proposal by DHS, as if it's the judge's place to decide what is and is not a terrible immigration proposal. The D.C. Circuit Court, no hotbed of conservative activism, reversed her and noted that, quote, there could hardly be a more definitive expression of congressional intent than the clear language of the statute she disregarded because she didn't care. She had an anti-Trump op-ed to write in the form of a judicial opinion as part of her audition for the political left to put her on the Supreme Court one day. Last week, Senator Durbin said that despite Judge Jackson saying explicitly that she doesn't have a judicial philosophy, she does have one, but, quote, you have to take the time to read any or all of her 578 opinions that she has issued. And for once, Senator Durbin and I see things similarly.